Manekshaw and Sagat are responsible for the strategic rejuvenation of the Indian Army against China. So he turns around and says, Mr. Prime Minister, may I know what experience do you have to take over as Prime Minister? He said it and he paid the price. On this throne before you also thought he was God. The problem today is that there is more money in firing drones. Are we spending enough or are the Chinese overspending? So that is our game. We will play our game. China will play its game. It's not for sheep, it's for free-thinking goats.
In today's world where conflicts and global issues are more complex than ever, understanding what makes a great military leader is crucial. These leaders not just command armies, but are key in shaping strategies that maintain peace and stability. As technology and geopolitical landscape change, the skills and insight of these leaders become key in navigating challenges. Today, we are joined by Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, who is the Army Commander of our track and now the Honorable Member of the UPSC, brings with him a wealth of experience in leadership. Today's conversation will be about two great leaders who were crucial in the victory of India-Pakistan War in 1971, Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw and General Sagat Singh. Don't miss out on this fascinating conversation with General Shukla that sheds light on the qualities of successful military leaders. Presenting to you, Sam and Sagat.
So, what, according to you, how would you define leadership?
So see, militaries are defined by their quality of leadership. I mean, if you don't have leadership, you don't have a military. Unlike any other profession, I think leadership is central to the soul of the military. Right from the time you get to your academies, National Defence Academy and the Indian Military Academy, and their parallels in, say, the Navy or the Air Force. Leadership is emphasized at every stage. Now, see, leadership can be some absolutely fundamental attributes of integrity, honesty, diligence. They are phenomenally important. Bravery, valor, all that is phenomenally important.
Right.
But today we will discuss some higher order attributes of leadership, which I think have not got adequate attention in India. So that's one part. You say, what is leadership? I will say leadership is wisdom. It is vivek, as they say in Hindi. What is wisdom? Wisdom is common sense in an uncommon degree. So I'm making this point that leadership has higher order attributes, but the outcome of those attributes play out in a very pragmatic, commonsensical manner. There is another definition of leadership by Winston Churchill. Churchill said that leadership is the ability to move from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And there are numerous examples. Abraham Lincoln, I'm told before he became president, lost almost every election. He had major reversals right through his life. He started peaking only in 30. Winston Churchill, pre-war, was a disaster. World War II, he was a hero. And the moment the war ended, the British public threw him out of office again. There are attributes for an era, for a particular set of circumstances. It's a very all-encompassing kind of subject. So let me give you one more in that one, this bit about, principally it's about tenacity, your ability to rise above adversity. There's a lovely couplet that says, the poet is telling the bird, कि तुंडइये मुख्तलिफ से ना घबरा ए काब. Tundaiye mukhtalif is adverse wind. He's telling the bird, fear not the adverse wind. Tundaiye mukhtalif, adverse wind, se na ghabra e kaab. Kaab is bird. Tundaiye mukhtalif se na ghabra e kaab. Ye to aaya hai tujhe aur uncha udane ke liye. This gust of adverse wind comes to waft you even higher. And from experience, I can tell you that. So leadership is, your ability to master adversity.
There's a lot of different interpretations of leadership.
Obviously, there'll be various situations. It's also your ability to manage contradictions. You see, life, when you are young, your parents tend to paint life in black and white, right or wrong. But the more complex issues always come in shades of grey. It's your ability. There is this very well-regarded bureaucrat, I think Mr. Anil Agarwal, former coal secretary and all. He also starts his book on leadership, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, with a lovely quote. Again, it's a couplet. It's about managing contradictions. So that couplet says कि मुख्तसर जिंदगी के अजीब अफसाने हैं. This life of yours has many tales to tell, many things that you have to enact. यहाँ तीर भी चलाने हैं और परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. You have to shoot arrows and yet make sure that the birds are not harmed.
Yeah.
So, as I said, it's common sense, it's wisdom, it is your ability to manage contradictions, but all on a very strong edifice of those basic virtues: honesty, diligence. For example, people say, moralize about honesty. I would say honesty is a strategic advantage. It puts you into a very different genre if you're honest intellectually, not merely financially. Mr. Agarwal makes this distinction. He says in life you have to accommodate, but accommodation is distinct from compromise. So it's not that you have to be rigid. So the leadership has these many.
So leadership may be managing success over failure. In simple words, in very simple words, it could be just getting the success with your team, of course. Yes. That could be the essence.
Leadership is doing these things that I referred to, the ability to do these things with wisdom and vivek. And if you do that, the chances of success are more than failure. I put it that way.
So before we speak about the attributes of leadership, I would like to ask, there are different school of thoughts about leadership as well. Some say that leaders are born and some say leaders are made. What would you think is the right statement?
I mean, so, in school, when I was in school, this was the favorite topic of debate: leadership, how are they made? I don't think they fit these definitions exactly. Leaders are what? For example, say, what is luck? I think General Patrius makes this statement. Our texts also talk about it. He says that luck is nothing but preparation meeting opportunity. So if you are diligent, if you are well prepared, when that opportunity comes, you make the most of it. People say it's luck. So your ability to constantly prepare and be diligent to make the most of the opportunity could be leadership. So there are various variations, but the best way to do it, I think, is to study these real life examples from the military. And why the military? Because military is a domain that I am familiar with. So today in our conversation, we will not talk of valor and bravery. That has been documented in our context, I think, pretty well. Right from Abdul Hamid to Vikram Batra. I mean, that part of the Indian Army, or let me say even the Defence Services, has been documented very well. It is these other higher order virtues, at the apex level of leadership, which I think we could talk, and it may be of interest to you.
So you were in the army for 30 years, more than 30 years, and you have undertaken some leadership roles as well over the years. How is your leadership style changed from the beginning to the end? And someone that you looked up to at one point of time, how they were a leader, and how you tried to mimic them in the army, and how did it transform your decision making, for that matter, in terms of leadership?
Yeah, so see, when I related to my own career, there have been some outstanding people. There have been some very talented people, as there have been mediocres. I mean, that's a fact of life. You get all kinds of people. But the army, there have been some very inspirational people who I will not name, but one has tried to emulate. So there are some very standout people which you have learnt a lot. One has tried to emulate them, but at the end of the day, I will make one point. Leadership is a discovery of your own self-worth, your own unique selling proposition that you discover on the way. I mean, it's pointless. I cannot be a Sam Manekshaw. I am not a Sam Manekshaw. Sam Manekshaw cannot be Raj Shukla, or I cannot be Shivam Arya. You have to discover those innate attributes which make you a leader. And of course, you have to adapt them to circumstance, and to the situation, to the people around you. So it is that ability. Therefore, I say it's intelligence, wisdom. You see, there are three levels. There is information, there is knowledge, and there is wisdom. Information is facts and figures. And knowledge is, when you put those facts and figures, you get some analytical worth. And of course, you ultimately have to rise through information and knowledge to wisdom, which is a hunch, which is a sixth sense,
Strategic thought, for that matter.
thought, a feel, Vivek. I'll give an example. You heard of the movie Major Sahab? It's Nafisa Ali who's recounting this. That she once went on the sets of Major Sahab. She arrives, the shoot is at 10 o'clock or so, she arrives at quarter to 10 or say 9:30, and she's going through her lines, and in the corner of her eye she notices that Amitabh Bachchan is already there, and Amitabh Bachchan was an established superstar by then. So she asks the makeup man or whatever कि ये बच्चन साहब कब आए, and she thinks कि वो 9 बजे आए होंगे. He tells her, मैम वो 8:30 से आए हैं और 20 टेक कर चुके हैं. So look at the importance of diligence now. Even for a superstar, if he's not diligent, he wouldn't be that superstar. There is so much effort that he puts into his practice that when he appears on screen, he's effortless.
True.
So now, if I just say diligence, people will not digest it. But if I tell you this is how diligence is crafted, take the example of Vinod Kambli, Sachin Tendulkar. I remember in India Today article, and the common thought was that Kambli was more gifted. He had a better eye-hand coordination.
Yeah.
He would see the ball earlier than, he was more talented. But perhaps Tendulkar was, of course, talented, but as diligent, more diligent. So this is the value of hard work, diligence. So leadership will be a combination of factors, in that sense. So like the army, like any other profession, has its stalwarts, it has its icons, it has its brilliant people. And see, there can be domains of leadership. You can be a combat leader, you can be a thought leader, you can be a futurist.
Yeah.
So you need people for various challenges. I'll give an example. So 2015, the Combined Commanders Conference, I recollect, the Prime Minister said that we had a lot of people with valor in the armed forces. We now need thought leaders to drive change through the national security system. So it also depends on the era in which your organization is. Today, if the Indian armed forces need change, then perhaps those leaders need to be prioritized over a different set of leaders. So leadership is life. Leadership is a very complex.
But your understanding of leadership must have changed over the years.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand, where did it end?
So the attributes change. So as a young leader, you are expected to be with your men. You got to be on the ball as far as squad and company affairs.
Lead by example.
Lead by example. Leading by example remains a trait right through, though it changes in some sense. So those are the requirements. Mid-career, you have to, as you said, lead by example. You have to run with your troops, walk with them. They also gauge your attributes, your genuineness, and so on and so forth. And see how leadership is nurtured. I'll give you one example. So when I was in my unit, 2 Field Regiment, one day there was a TA Havaldar, just a Havaldar, we call him a TA Havaldar, I still remember, of Tar Singh. उन दिनों एक किताब होती थी 8 of 88. It was supposed to be the Bible for gunners, and it was not readily available. उन दिनों किताबें were very, confidentiality bit was overemphasized. They were not ready. He photostated a copy and came and gave it to me and told me, "Sir, मैं देखता हूँ कि आप पढ़ाई में अच्छे हैं. ये आप look at that. A Havaldar giving me a copy and telling me to study, and he also tells me jokingly कि sir, mess में time बर्बाद मत किया करिए. Drinking. Look at that. That also struck. So it is these bits and pieces which make you grow as a leader. He was a well-wisher, you have some mentors, you have competitors, you have peers, you have saboteurs. So you'll have to live with all these people. Later on in life, see, one big misnomer about the military is that you don't need brains. It's absolute nonsense. The way the cycle works is that in the initial years, you need to be physically fit, or the physical attributes get emphasized. In the later years, it has to be brains. So I'm saying today, the highest levels, 3 stars and 4 stars, they have to be the best intellectual minds. You have to have a sense not only of the military, but of wider geopolitics and international. Henry Kissinger says that if a service officer Service officers, geopolitics must run in their veins. If you don't understand geopolitics, my own, shall I say, point of emphasis is to not draw these distinctions. There's that lovely saying, that a nation which draws a sharp distinction between its scholars and its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and fighting done by fools. So I am for a well-rounded persona insofar as leadership is concerned, and that can be entirely done. And of course, you have to change greatly. At the right top level, you have to engage, you have to find out what is really required and delegate the rest. Clarity is another attribute. Clarity. Napoleon has this, there is a nice tale about Napoleon about clarity. So it is said that, Napoleon used to write love letters to his wife on a weekly basis or on a daily basis. And one of those letters he writes, he says, "Beloved, had I more time, my letters to you would have been shorter." Meaning that even in romance you need clarity, or you waste your time waffling. So the more serious issues of life, you need clarity.
True.
These things come with study, with experience. So of course, this from a second lieutenant to a lieutenant general, I think the graduation of leadership is like this. You have to constantly make sure you grow, or you will fail.
True. So the Indian Armed Forces pays huge weightage to leadership.
Yes.
With their SSB interviews that they conduct. So how do you think they can improve the system in terms of getting the best cream of leaders at a young age as a cadet as well?
They are already doing it, but we could do far more. See, I'll give you an example. Today, the civil servants, now that I'm in the UPSC, you interview them for what, 30 minutes, 40 minutes? So in 40 minutes you get, of course, they go through a very rigorous process of prelims and mains, but thereafter it's 40 minutes that you are putting them through a sieve. The SSBs you have 3 to 4 days. It's luxury. So you already have, these psychometric tests, and you have group discussions, you have debates, speaking, these tests which are designed to test your abilities to lead, to fit into a team. So all that is being done, but they can be modernized greatly, simply because you have 3 to 4 days. It is luxury. 4 days or 3 days versus 30 minutes.
True.
So some of that is on, but a lot more can be done in that area too.
What kind of conditioning do you get in order to be a good leader in the army?
Conditioning is the best conditioners are real life situations on the LAC, on the LC, in various other conflict situations on a day-to-day basis.
No, because the real conditioning happens at a conflict situation, for example.
Okay. So I'll tell you the best way to do that is to go through what I'm going to tell you now.
Okay.
So you will see from these great figures and their life how they grew as leaders. So let me make the first point that I wish to make, which is that we are talking of higher order leaders, higher order leadership. So I would say that the pantheon of India's military leadership is wide, varied and rich. And I emphasize the 3 words: wide, varied and rich. So, of course, we have produced leaders who've been brave and valorous and all, but we've had thought leaders. We've had excellent field commanders. We've had futurists. We've had reformists. Whole bevy in terms of what you call gold standards in leadership. Gold standards, and I'll tell you example after example. Soldiers, diplomats. So now you just see there are 10 variants of leadership, and by examples we'll discuss all this. So, it is a cesspool of talent, or it has been a cesspool of talent in my view, and we'll discuss it. If you don't agree with me, you shred me to pieces. Look at the sheer repertoire. You had these 2 field marshals, Field Marshal Kareppa and Field Marshal Manekshaw. So Kareppa, of course, laid the foundational moorings of the Indian Army in terms of the traditions of apoliticality, a secular frame, an ethos of brightness and integrity. See, look at the standards that he set. I'm told one day he comes from office and he asks as to where is his son. And he said, sir, वो स्कूल गया. He says, अच्छा कैसे गया? He says, sir, वो स्टाफ कार भेज. और he says, वो स्कूल से भी आ रहा है. He says, कैसे आ रहा है? उसे स्टाफ कार भेजी उनको लेने के लिए. He orders the court martial of his ADC, for sending the car to fetch his son. Look at the standards that he was setting in uprightness, morality. Without Karappa or without his kind of leadership, this army may have been an entirely different political instrument. There are armies in the neighborhood which have gone extremely awry. Look at that. So Karappa, secular ethos, apoliticality. You had Sam Manekshaw. Now, Manekshaw, the point I wish to make is, see, look at his contributions. He's an architect of India's greatest and most comprehensive victory in modern times, 1971. It changed the way you looked at politics in South Asia. It carved a nation. Without Manekshaw and Sagat, we'll be talking about them, there would have been no Dhaka, there would have been no Bangladesh. Look at his contribution. Also, one point I'd like to make about Manekshaw, this is also in the context of the film which we recently saw. In the case of Manekshaw, the flamboyance of his public demeanor tends to mask the great substantiveness and gravitas of the man. Have you got what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was not that he was just flamboyant. He had great substantiveness and gravitas. And we'll discuss Manekshaw separately. But this is just one point I wish to leave for you. Look at his interpretation of politicality. He said, we are deeply politically conscious, but consciously not politically committed. Look at that higher order virtue. That means we understand all politics, but it's a conscious, sacred decision not to dabble in politics. Has that not stood in the Indian Army in great stead?
That's been.
You cannot get out of politics. Life is politics. Aristotle said that humans are political animals, but you have to have the intelligence to stay out of politics. Why? Because it is in your interest and perhaps your institutional interest. Thakur Nathu Singh, have you heard of Thakur Nathu Singh?
Not
Lieutenant General Thakur Nathu Singh. He was this fearless nationalist. He would say that I'm a high caste Hindu and it's below my dignity to dine with British officers. You may not agree with it, but I'm painting to you one facet. A great mind. And in those days, in one of these papers for the staff college, strategy paper, he scored 915 out of 1000, which remains a record till this day. And the British acknowledged his merit. Though I've told you his attitude, he was pretty anti-British. He had a strong connect with Subhash Chandra Bose. And during the INA trial, he was one of the few Indian officers who spoke against it. Look at the character of that man. In the 1930s, he's having conversations with Sardar Baldev Singh, who became Defence Minister, Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sarojini Naidu, about how India will one day have to face a two-front threat. Can you imagine in the 1930s, somebody as forward-looking? What should be the size and shape of our defence budget?
Yeah.
This is this man. People have not heard of him. I'm sure you've not heard of him. The Indian Army has had the wisdom of such people. There is a conversation with Pandit Nehru, and by the way, he would have been chief. He didn't become chief many say because of this incident, but look at his courage. So Pandit Nehru is discussing with the service chiefs as to once the British leave, should the leadership continue in British hands for a while to enable the service to settle down, or should they migrate straight to Indian leadership? So I think the Air Force and the Navy, they are of the view that the Britishers must continue. Nathu Singh is arguing, no. He says we have people, Karappa, Thimaya, and we should migrate straight away. So Prime Minister Nehru makes an observation. He says, oh, they don't have experience. So he turns around and says, Mr. Prime Minister, may I know what experience do you have to take over as Prime Minister? He said it, and he paid the price. But this is the kind of, so if you talk of uprightness and all those, they are not such mere empty slogans. They have been practiced in this army. Karappa, Manekshaw. Now, when I say repertoire is wide, rich and varied, you see this K.S. Thimaya, one of our most popular and admired generals. If he had not run into, shall we say, personality clash with Krishna Menon, our history would have been different. We would have done far better with the Chinese than we did. Zoru Bakshi, General Zoru Bakshi, the most decorated general, who won a gallantry award at every rank from company commander to divisional commander. Not AVSM, PVSM.
Wow.
These are all service awards.
Yeah, yeah.
Gallantry Award. S.K. Sinha, General S.K. Sinha, when he was superseded, General Vaidya was made the chief. Look at the grace with which he left the army. An extremely well-read man. He was known as a soldier, statesman, governor of J&K, later on governor of, also our ambassador.
So are you trying to say, sir, constructive disobedience is key in being a good leader?
The moral courage is, of course, very key. Moral courage, their ability to speak your mind is extremely, the ability to speak truth to power is very key. Akbar, in a predominantly Mughal court, Birbal was one of his courtiers, a Hindu. Why? Because they say his ability to speak truth to power. Whenever Akbar would start feeling that he was high and mighty, he would recite a verse which said, कि तुमसे पहले जो शख्स यहाँ नदीम था, उसे भी अपना खुदा होने का यकीन था. The guy seated on this throne before you also thought he was God. Actually, all of us need a Birbal in our lives who can keep us rooted. So speaking truth to power is extremely important. There's a lovely verse in sentence in Hindi which says, "Sehmati ka sahas, sehmati ka vivek." The wisdom to agree, but the courage to disagree. This should go naturally in our conversations. Harbaksh Singh, because of him, in 65, he stood on the river Beas and made sure that we didn't lose territory. You read his accounts. Captain Amrinder Singh has written a beautiful book on him, on his leadership. Hanuj Singh, a brilliant tactician. The Basantar crossings of 1971. Under his command, Pune horse rose to great traditions of valor. It was this tradition of valor that he introduced which led to the great acts of bravery of Arun Khetarpal. Arun Khetarpal was in his regiment. In Pune horse, you see, I'm told what he would do. He would call all the youngsters as the senior subaltern, gather them, say, at 6:30, discuss Shakespeare, discuss the tactics of the day, discuss international relations, and then go for a drink. Look at that. So there have been such people. So the Indian Army has been built brick by brick by all these people. And here I must concede, I should have said it right at the beginning, 2 books I'll recommend for your viewers. One is Leadership by Major General V.K. Singh, not General V.K. Singh, Major General V.K. Singh from the Signals. 12 biographies of India's soldiers, something like that. Outstanding book. All that I'm telling you is from there.
Wow.
There's another book by General Randhir Singh, Talent for War, is how he describes Sagat. I mean, he was the best captain of war we've ever had. Talent for war. I'm a big one for reading biographies and autobiographies.
You learn a lot from
distilled leadership, and you just read them. How it helps you is when you are faced with that particular daunting challenge, those thoughts will come. Yeah. So I'm just recounting Hanuj Singh, Krishnaswamy Sundarji, if you heard of him. He was a futurist. Mechanized operations, Sumandrang Chu was because of him. Of course, he made some mistakes in Punjab and perhaps in Sri Lanka, but futurist. He went for a course abroad, and his report card said he's fit to command a NATO army. Those days, I remember when I was growing up, he was on the India Today cover every month. He's responsible for the mechanization of the Indian army. Prem Bhagat, the present chief, is a sapper. Prem Bhagat was also a sapper, an engineer officer. Look at him. He got a Victoria Cross in World War II. So Braun, later on, when this Henderson Brooks report was written after the 1962 debacle, he was one of the main authors of that report. Braun and Brain. So, this is Brigadier Muhammad Usman, the Lion of Nowshera. So, just R.N. Batra. He was a signal officer in chief, a great technological mind, who set up ARIN and ASCON years before the Indian Army had started talking of mechanized offensive operations. Now look at the names that I have recounted to you.
They haven't been publicized a lot.
They have in these books, but perhaps not as
much
well read. So perhaps your video will help to do that. But The edifice of the Indian Army has built on leaders as diverse as this, as solid as this, as distinct as this. So leadership, a good organization needs distinctive leaders. I mean, you can't be all orderless, colorless, stateless, tasteless. You have to have very strong leadership attributes. It's a misnomer that, the armed forces, you need to be straight-jacketed and it's a dull and boring profession. Certainly not. It's not for sheep, it's for free-thinking goats. So, so this is the first point I wanted
Because
to make.
we also need stories for
Yes.
the younger generation to be inspired by these
Yes.
individuals and maybe learn from them, right?
So now I will tell you the stories of two men. And let's call this podcast Sam or Sagat, or Sam and Sagat,
Sam and Sagat.
where I am inclined to make this point that we've had such outstanding leaders. But amongst these titans, if there are two icons, in my view, they are Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw and Lieutenant General Sagat Singh. For two reasons. One is I have no evidence, but there was some kind of mentor-mentee relationship between the two. Sagat would not have survived without the blessings of Sam. So, in my view, Manekshaw had a stature of his own, but he mentored Sagat into his role as GOC4 Corps when he executes that dash to Dhaka, which is a pretty critical point in our history. So one is the mentor-mentee relationship, and the other reason is that in consequence, their contributions have been the most profound to India's military history. In terms of the most comprehensive victory against Pakistan, 1971, they were substantial contributors, Manekshaw in Delhi and Sagat in the field in command of 4 Corps. Also in the strategic rejuvenation of the Indian Army from the depths of 1962, when Indian Army was in an absolutely bad shape. Manekshaw and Sagat are responsible for the strategic rejuvenation of the Indian Army against China. So against our two principal adversaries, if there are दो अगर ऐसी शख्सियत हैं जिनका योगदान सबसे ज़्यादा और महत्वपूर्ण रहा है, तो है Sam and Sagat, in my view.
Right.
So we will discuss Sam and Sagat, of course, with your permission, because you're the boss of the podcast.
No, sir, absolutely. I would love to know more about Sam and Sagat.
So let's start with Sagat. We'll start with Sagat, Sam, and then their Jugalbandi. So Jugalbandi is what? Playful competition. Like you have in that orchestra, Jugalbandi. Inke bhi Jugalbandi thi. That's the point I'm making. Now look at Sagat first. Why Sagat? Because Sam is already known. So let's talk of Sagat. I spoke of this great repertoire of leadership. But when it comes to combat leadership, combat genius, sheer talent for war, Yudh Kala, there is nobody as brilliant as Sagat, at least in the Indian context.
Why would you say that, sir?
I'll tell you why, with examples. So as his biographer, General Ranveer Singh says, there is none as remarkable and fascinating as General Sagat Singh. He's a combat legend. His exploits are part of the Indian Army's folklore, but they are not so, publicly known. And so that is the point I'll make. So the first point here is that, in war, which is basically a two-sided match, and the odds of winning or losing are equal. There are no runners up here. You either win or you lose. War is that. So where the odds are equal, Sagat beat all odds. In 4 major campaigns in which he was a participant, or a leader actually, he won all 4. The Goan campaign, the Nathula crisis in 1967, which is part of this rejuvenation, in tackling the Mizo insurgency, and then finally the dash to Dhaka, 71. All 4 he wins. So he was always this unyielding commander. He was willing to fight wars uncompromisingly and always to a victorious end. Somebody said, he understood very early in life कि जंग जो है वो असूलों की लड़ाई नहीं है, पर जंग का एक ही उसूल है, वो है जीत.
To win, yeah.
So it has only one principle. He was a great finisher like
So
Dhoni.
what would you say would be the standout for him to?
So I'll just tell you. So let's see this. I was making this point that he's been both valiant and victorious, Veer or Vijay. So the Indian military tradition has tended to emphasize valor over victory. So let's take Porus, Maharana Pratap, Prithviraj Chauhan, Rani Lakshmi Bai. They were of course valiant. उनकी जो गाथाएं हैं, उनकी बहादुरी की, वीरता की, वो they are the stuff of legend. But they all lost their wars. They were not victorious in that sense. Sagat was victorious. Veer or Vijay, that itself makes him, puts him in an entirely different class. And that is not known. Two, you see, Sagat's achievements in war also won him great international acclaim. The Sunday Times, London Sunday Times, in the edition of 12 September 71, had this to say about the dash to Dhaka in which General Sagat participated. He said it took only 12 days for the Indian army to smash its way to Dhaka, an achievement reminiscent of the German blitzkrieg across Poland and France in 1940. Now, in military terms, that's a very flattering comparison. He's saying that 1971 was like the blitzkrieg. The blitzkrieg, as we all know, the characteristics were speed, ferocity, and flexibility. And of course, it was, the campaign was also about great smart technological leveraging. Sagat did that. He launched heliborne operations in 1971 when they were not even taught in your schools of instruction. He was a thinker. So to the ground flank, he brought an aerial flank, heliborne operations. He was always ahead of the battle. He was from a very humble beginnings. I think in Bikaner, he went to a vernacular school, not even a Hindi school. He went to a Marwadi school. From Marwadi to Hindi, then to English medium. But when he gets into the services, he does staff college from two places. Quetta mein jahan hota tha us dino, or Haifa. So humble beginnings, but basically an avid reader, very sharp mind, and a risk taker. A bold risk taker. So this risk-taking element of his leadership, the architect of the Blitzkrieg, and look who's saying, London Times. It was a path-breaking style of, military maneuvers, as I said, predicated on speed, mass, envelopment, and some very smart technological leveraging, but the Germans mastered over decades. Sagat did it in 71. And he was not from the Armored Corps, which is actually the arm of maneuver. He was from the infantry. Sagat developed similar combat metrics and operational finesse in the dash to Dhaka. General V.K. Singh compares him with Patton. You heard of Patton? Patton is a World War II general who was known, he was known as the master of pursuit. Fast. He compares him with that. Patton was fleeing a retreating German army. Sagat was breaking his way through some of the most formidable defenses. In the initial battles to Dhaka, he is despondent. He is not winning. He is faced with moments of great crisis. He thinks that he has overstretched when he in his mind has that objective of Dhaka. But ultimately his tenacity, his ability to be tough when it is required, change leaders, sack people, all that helps him. And of course, his great ability to maneuver, all the arms in battle, infantry, artillery, aviation, and that comes from all his reading of many years, which he puts to test here. Now, one more issue, is that I would like to say is that see, look at this attribute of Sagat. Now, it must not be misunderstood, but it has to be understood in the right manner. His army commander was General Jagjit Singh Arora. And in between the point of launch and Dhaka, there is a major river which comes, Meghna. Meghna river is 3 times as wide as the river Rhine, which, was the river, World War II. World War II. So, General Arora tells Sagat that your orders are that you will not cross the Meghna. And by the time Sagat had come to be known as this very brilliant and bold commander in the Goa campaign, he was leading the reserve echelon. And he ended up reaching the capital faster than all the other three. He was bold, risk-taking, very dynamic. So in his scheme of things, General Arora didn't want him to cross the Meghna. But as I think General Randhi writes in the biography, Sagat made up his mind. He said, if I get to the Meghna, I'll cross it. Of course, he didn't say it publicly, but he made up his mind. And of course, all his brilliant tactics, he beats all odds, and in 12 days, which surprises even the London Times, he's on the banks of the Meghna. And that night, there's a conversation between him and General Arora, and General Arora tells him, Sagat, you will not cross the Meghna, or words to that effect. And Sagat says, sir, I'm a co-commander. I see opportunity across Dhaka beyond. I know it's in the national interest. I'm crossing the Meghna. Now, this is what distinguishes the men from the boys. Yeah. It is not, shall I say, insubordination, but it is exploiting an opportunity in the national interest when he differs with his boss. He could have paid the price. If Dhaka's success had failed, he would have been court-martialed. Mm-hmm. But he did not. Now, this is risk-taking, sensing the moment. Which leadership book will teach you this? It cannot be taught.
Cannot be taught.
And this is what distinguishes, as I said, the men from the boys. But was this taught to him? I'll tell you how he may have taught himself. He takes risk-taking in his initial years and finesses it to a fine art. In concert with that other icon, Manekshaw. And as I said, mentor-mentee relationship. Mm-hmm. And they come together in this jugalbandi to the collective good of our national security. So this was, 1971. Now see how they operated in different domains. Manekshaw was here in Delhi, the CDS whom we never have. But he had this way, his ability to persuade the bureaucracy, his charm with the media, his equation with the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, the trust that they developed. So he operated in the strategic military domain, which is a very different domain. But he would not have been able to deliver on 71 if you didn't have the tactical operational brilliance of Sagat in 4 Corps. And I have this hunch that Manekshaw knew that if somebody can deliver for Dhaka, it is Sagat. So he positions him here to deliver on. Mm-hmm. His command of 4 Corps is not incidental. And he had got into trouble in Nathula and all, and yet Manekshaw promotes him. So this mentor-mentee relationship. So this is in so far as the Western Front, as far as the Pakis are concerned, But you see this Jugalbandi, it goes back decades. It begins with, now let's take Manekshaw. See, Manekshaw was a risk taker of another kind. World War II, he, as a captain, is in a patrol which gets ambushed and he, 7 bullets are fired into his stomach and his intestines. Now look at this. There's a story. There must be some truth to it. So he's taken to the field hospital where there is an Australian surgeon. Mm-hmm. And there are so many people coming. So the surgeon takes a look at him and says, no, I'll not operate on him. He has no chances of survival. And he, by the way, asks him, what happened? So Sam says, he had 7 bullets here. And he says, a bloody mule kicked me. I mean, he's being sarcastic and saying, yeah, I've got 7 bullets. You're asking me what happened. So he says 7. So the surgeon says, by Jove, he has a sense of humor. He deserves to be served. Mm-hmm. Saved. So he's brought on the table, operated. Thereafter, his father writes to him in great seriousness and says, Sam, you are in deep trouble with this operation. Now take care of your health. If you continue to drink and smoke, you are gone. Sam Manekshaw tells his friend 4 months later, he says, my father told me not to drink and smoke. I continued to drink and smoke, and so I survived. Now you see this rebel streak in him, mm-hmm. his ability to grapple with crisis. Now look at this journey of Sam Manekshaw. Of course, he runs into trouble with Krishna Menon. When Krishna Menon is playing politics with the Indian Army, he meets him in Jammu and says, Sam, what do you think of Thimayat? Thimayat is in the chief. Sam Manekshaw says, sir, in the army we are under orders not to think of our superiors. So Sam Krishna Menon says, come on, don't be so silly. You're an intelligent man. I'm sure you have an opinion of him. He says, sir, I have an opinion of him, but I also have an opinion of you. Today you're asking me what I think of Thimaya, tomorrow you'll ask my subordinates what you think of me. Telling Mr. Menon to please stay out of politics, but it needed guts to do all this.
Wow.
So risk-taking, guts, and now you see what happens. This is where the Jugalbandi begins. So after the 62 debacle, so now Krishna Menon Manekshaw is consigned to Staff College, and it's known that his career is now going to come to an end. He was on the wrong side of Krishna Menon. And he says, with his typical humor, he says, I would have gone home, but the Chinese came to my rescue. Means if the Chinese had not attacked, now they're looking for someone to command the defeated corps of 4 corps. Tejpur. Tejpur now is a ghost town. The Chinese have come, the public people have left. Even the Indian army has retreated from the posts. And he goes on the first day and he says, gives orders to occupy the posts again. And he makes that famous speech where he says, gentlemen, I have arrived, there will be no more withdrawals. One line address, and tells people to go up. Now you see, it is all built up from that incident when he's got those 7 bullets, Krishna Menon, this moral courage, risk-taking, they are built over the years. It doesn't come in one day.
Of course.
Now when he makes this statement, a week later, he has to host Prime Minister Nehru, General Chaudhary, who's the chief, Indira Gandhi, who's nobody but Nehru's daughter. They come. And Prime Minister Nehru is again worried. He says, Sam, we've just had a major debacle. You're pushing the people up. It will be escalation again. I don't want to lose more lives. And Sam Manekshaw says, sir, this is the way I'll fight. If you don't like it, you can send me back to Wellington. So anecdotally, we are told that Indira Gandhi draws Prime Minister Nehru aside and tells her father, we are in such a bad situation. Most places we are losing. Here is one general willing to stand up and fight, let him. So Nehru backtracks. And Indira Gandhi, in her mind, subconsciously spots Manekshaw as the leader, and they grow, mutual respect grows, which stands us in such good stead in the crisis in 71. So that relationship between them, the foundation was laid in this encounter with Tejpur. Now, when I told you the strategic rejuvenation with China, he made this statement that the Chinese, he demonstrated that the Chinese are not 10 feet tall if we are willing to act. This is Manekshaw and Tejpur. Concurrently, or sometime around the same time, in 1967, Sagat is commanding the brigade in Nathula, or perhaps the division in Nathula. Yes, Nathula. Division in Nathula. And the Chinese in 67 are once again, all aggression all over this, that. And there are 2 divisions, 17 and 27. They are given the option of withdrawing from the watershed to their permanent defenses, say in Changu. One of the division commanders does it. Sagat refuses. He says, I will hold the watershed. He's told the Chinese are far superior. He said, so what? We are no less. Needed great courage to do this so soon after 62. It results in that famous Nathula incident where he opens artillery fire. He almost refuses orders to come down. He says, I will stand and fight. Opens artillery fire. Of course, we lose 200 people. The Chinese lose 300. So it is first time after 62 when we show battlefield resolve. See the leadership of Manekshaw and Tejpur. This incident, 67 Nathula incident. This thereafter leads to Sumandrong Chu, what Sundarji did, and subsequently Divine Matrix and this whole op rebalancing to China. This has not happened in a day. This strategic rejuvenation with China would not have happened without Sagat. And now once Sagat does it, he's an order of people, General Babu, his corps commander and all, for unnecessary aggression and all. And Manekshaw is in Delhi. He's officiating as the chief then because the chief has gone abroad, and he's asked about this. And Manekshaw says, oh, so Sagat is playing Hamlet without the prince. Means the prince is in Delhi and he's up to his tricks. So half admonishment, half encouragement. He was quite happy that somebody was standing up. But Sagat pays the consequence. He's sent to command the area in, I think, in Nagaland. But there he seeks an opportunity again in taming the Mizo insurgency, and he does a wonderful job. So now see Goa, Nathula, Mizoram, and finally 4 Corps Dhaka. In 67, in the Mizo insurgency, in 4 Corps, Manekshaw was the, shall we say, silent mentor. Without Manekshaw, Sagat's qualities wo unka nikhar na hota. उभर के ना आ पाते. These qualities of boldness, risk taking, to stand up for what you think is right when the whole world is telling you you're wrong, Nathola. These were these qualities of very rare qualities in Sam Manekshaw. Now, through the incidents that I have narrated to you, they didn't happen in a day.
No.
Risk-taking, character. Now, also see one more character attribute of Manekshaw. Look at his magnanimity amongst all this. When he has this run-in with Mr. Krishna Menon, he is being hounded through an inquiry in Wellington. And one of the officers who deposes against him in that inquiry, ultimately when Manekshaw is chief, his file comes to him. And he writes on that file that, there is a conflict of interest since he deposed against me. And he marks that file to the defense secretary or somebody, and that officer is promoted. So look at it, valor, courage, but magnanimity.
Yeah.
Now these are outstanding virtues. And good leaders are an amalgam of all these virtues. When these virtues come together, they help you tackle that challenge in an entirely distinct manner. So now if you ask me, that's to sum up leadership. If you take all these attributes of leadership, so it is these individual attributes coming together in these kind of jugalbandis, mentor, mentee, protection of your peers. Look at that answer of Manekshaw to Krishna Menon, which makes an organization strong in leadership attributes, leadership virtues. So leaders are not built in a day, nor are organizations strong on leadership being created overnight. They take decades to construct and to build. Now if you go back, and now if I tell you that the Indian Army has had some very outstanding leaders, a very high bar that we have to live up to, it is all these people. And therefore, sometimes I feel this is not emphasized, and therefore this podcast was a good opportunity to emphasize these attributes. Of course, we've had the other traditions of valor. I said Abdul Hamid, Vikram Batra, Flying Officer Sekho. Oh, that is an entirely different tradition. So valor, bravery, Arun Khetrapal is one part of the leadership dynamic. These attributes, thought leaders, futurologists, we spoke about.
So from your narrative, I get two questions. I'm going to ask you one question on Sagat and one on Sam Manekshaw. In the lines of General Sagat, you spoke about how he was always about the victory in war, right? Without considering the ethical parts of a warfare. Was that right? What did you think is the right way to go about it?
It's not. He did not violate any directly any ethical aspects of warfare. But see, what is Sam Dam Dand Bhed? In the foreign policy strategic sense, it means victory by means fair or foul, which means in war, it is all about demolishing the opponent. Deception is part of statecraft. The Chinese was a Mahabharata, is not full of tales of deception.
Right.
So it depends on what kind of ethics are you referring to. When two bodies are at war using violent means, what kind of ethics? Yes, if you're saying ethics in terms of collateral casualties, civilians, certainly not. The Indian Army has a very good tradition. Look at this Kashmir. We have never done these, grandstanding, pulling troops out all of a sudden, pulling them in. We've had a constant profile.
Yeah.
But we've also taken great care to minimize civil casualties. We have been very restrained in the use of force. We have been calibrated. So that kind of ethics certainly good. But war is a brutal business. I mean, in cricket, you have to be a finisher.
Right.
So in some sense, Sagat was also a good finisher. He made sure that he won. I mean, you're in the business of war to win. There are no runners up. He chose not to withdraw from Nathula to the comfort of Chambu. Somebody else did. But in consequence, that watershed is still today with you. As I said, he was a free-thinking goat, not a sheep. He had his own mind, which all officers must have. He applied that mind. He knew how to intelligently do that bit. तीर भी चलाने हैं, परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. So, in that sense, I think he was a very elevated leader.
In terms of Sam Manekshaw now, you would call him a risk taker.
Let me now say, He is more known for his charisma, flamboyance, the
Yeah.
fact that he called Indira Gandhi sweetie, whether he did it or not. वो tales ज़्यादा हैं. But I'm trying to emphasize the substantive issues of his. When he stood up to the Chinese in 4 Corps,
Right.
when he takes 7 bullets and rides through that adversity, when he displays moral courage to tell Mr. Krishnamenon what he did, these are not flamboyant issues. He was, हिंदी में से कहते हैं ना, ठहराव था उसमें.
So risk taking would
Substantiveness, gravitas.
yeah. What I'm trying to ask you is that risk taking would be called courageous if you're successful, if the timing is right and you're successful. If you're not successful, if you fail in a particular instance, will that be positive risk
You
taking?
fail, but you fail to live another day. Of course, you will fail. Anybody who doesn't fail is not going to do well in life at all. What are startups today? What are entrepreneurs about? The ability to take risk. Elon Musk, when he interviews people, I'm told if you have not failed, he doesn't take you in. So हमने ये जो है ना, this emphasis on sure shot success is actually a sign of insecurity, a sign of great caution, which is a bad quality.
No, sir.
इतना caution कि भाई success ही ना आए.
No, what I mean to say, sir, in military leadership, when you're taking risk, you're not taking risk for your own life, but the risk of lives of your battalion, for your group. Is that justified by being, a risk taker?
So it is incumbent upon you to make sure that your command is trained well, it is equipped well. But does it mean that having trained them and equipped them well, if there is the risk of life, you will not launch them? The profession, very nature of the profession is that lives will be lost.
Right.
So it has to be weighed with the national interest. You have to weigh restraint and offense, in terms of circumstances when it is in the national interest. For example, this Balakot or this Kailash, things could have gone wrong also. They were done because the national interests were required. So you have to minimize the risks. In fact, see, let's say in your whole strategy, we have this lovely quote, Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is one nation, one earth, one family,
Right.
convergence. But we should be informed by the other part of the duopoly. The other part of the duopoly is what Vivekananda says. He says that the world is a gymnasium where nations come to make themselves strong. So this Vasudev Kutumbakam is a good philosophy. But to de-risk it to the extent possible, you should be driven by what Vivekananda says. So force and diplomacy must be calibrated. Peace through strength, peace through deterrence. Good armies need not go to war
Yeah.
if they have strong deterrence. But if you do not have deterrence and you are weak, weaknesses will invite war. You ask the Ukrainians, when people said deterrence is costly, what is the lesson? Aren't wars costlier? So if they had invested in deterrence, wars, they would not have had to face the ignominy of war.
You gave beautifully 2 examples of military great leaders of the Indian Army, sir. Are there anyone that you look up to? Do you have any military leaders that you look up to?
In my own life, I don't want to, name them because it will sound like flattery. So, but they have been great leaders, very great leaders, inspirational, absolutely. And that is what makes the Indian Army such a fine organization. It also raises the bar. It raises the bar for current and future leaderships, that they have to live up to this bar. Leadership goes beyond definitions. We started off by trying to define leadership.
I did.
All the qualities that I have told you, they cannot be defined.
I would like to ask you, for instance, a young army officer is watching this conversation and he is trying to understand how he can not mimic Sam Manekshaw but become another as great as Sam Manekshaw. What would he should be doing in order
So
to
say that young army officer is a gentleman, say, called Balbir Sandhu. Say. So Balbir Sandhu should seek to emulate Sam. He may want to get inspired by Sam, but if he imitates Sam, he'll be a disaster. In trying to emulate Sam, he must intelligently see what of Sam matches with Balbir's innate attributes and adapt them to the challenge at hand. See, there is no point. Manekshaw did what he did in that era. Manekshaw did what he did because the Prime Minister was Indira Gandhi. Well, we today will have to do, in terms of leadership, that which applies to the persona of his boss of the time. So it is how you handle the challenge, the circumstance, and the personas with a certain intelligence, wisdom, all those qualities, while making sure that there is a certain baseline that you don't violate. So it is as complex as that. Manekshaw's leadership is charisma, flamboyance, the way he got through those bureaucrats, persuaded Indira Gandhi, led the 3 service chiefs as the CDS. Now, these require great qualities of head, heart, and mind. Head, heart, mind, and soul, I will say. It has to be a combination, but it is equally important. There is no point having a good head if it is not connected to a spine. A head, many people are very good in the head, but since their heads are not connected to their spine, they turn out to be disasters. So it has to be a fine amalgam of both. And you have to tailor it to the challenge at hand. You can be a made leader, you're born leader, and you have some certain attributes.
Some light in you.
Some light in you. But those attributes have to be refined along the way by a process of self-discovery. You discover this. Leadership is discovered. You feel your way through. कि भाई इस माहौल में this now I'm not saying that be unprincipled. Please don't mistake me. But so you have to be compromising. But accommodation, as I said, is not compromise. You have to adapt to leadership styles. You have to adapt to the environment. But that is, see, there's a famous General Colin Powell, if you heard of him. He was chairman of the American Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a great general. So Bush one day tells him, Colin, I hear people say you're a political general. He says, Mr. President, show me the general in Washington who doesn't understand politics, and I'll show you the fool. Because in Washington, if you don't understand politics, you cannot be a good general.
Yeah, you cannot.
And he also goes on to make the point. He says, you see, in the field, you need a very different set of attributes. So straight and narrow, black and white, orders, implement. He says, in Pentagon, leadership is about bending, retreating, waiting for your moment. Now you say, this is not a general, this is a power broker. But no, he's being honest. Leadership in Delhi will be very different from leadership in the field command.
Definitely.
It is, that's why, in one word, if you force me to define it, I will say it is wisdom, vivek. The wisdom, which is an amalgam of all this, but it is that vivek, which is not just information, knowledge, but that whole wisdom which you bring to bear.
So I see military leadership as a pinnacle in our nation, like in terms of leadership. Let's call it the topmost type of leadership. But
not necessarily so, but military leadership is definitely one of the biggest challenges. Because see, it is not only brawn, it is not only application of, say, troops, fire, it is an understanding of the larger geopolitical setting, your political intuitions, your hunches. So it is as challenging as any domain.
no, I'm saying there's a lot to learn from military leadership for an individual, let's say. But there's also...
As they would be from business leadership, as they would be from political leadership.
True, but that's what I'm getting to. One of the requirement in our leadership is the political system. How can the political system learn from the military institutions?
See, I have a slightly different view. The fundamental premise of your question is that politicians are rogues or they are not to be trusted. I disagree with that.
No, you said leadership requires wisdom.
Yes.
I see political leaders without wisdom is what I'm trying to say.
As they will be military leaders without wisdom. So, they are good military leaders, they are bad military leaders. They are good political leaders, bad political leaders. I am drawing this distinction that for far too long we have berated politicians. At least the bureaucracies, civil, military bureaucracies have berated politicians. Politics is equally challenging. Politics is equally unforgiving. We had some very good political leaders. And the same gentleman I'm talking of, Mr. Anil Agarwal, I think is his name. He names politicians who've been very good, who've been outstanding, who've been honest. So many of them. Diligent. So I will say they are good, bad leaders across professions.
Definitely, sir, but there's a large chunk in our
They are good business leaders. They are good. A startup can be a good leader. A podcaster can be a good leader. So I don't think there are distinctions of those kinds. I was trying to tell you how Indian military leadership is rich. So they can be examples extrapolated from here, beyond the military, within the military, as they would be otherwise. So today I think we are in an age of cross-pollination. where leadership from all walks of life can be brought together. But you see, there are certain military leadership has certain, shall we say, very firm fundamentals which cannot be violated. Example, firm orders, execution. Now, this perhaps in the civil stream is not as relevant. There it is perhaps more persuasion. Here it is by example. But see, let me make one more point to you. My experience tells me that the Indian Army has a very, image of a very firm exterior. Internally, it's one of the most democratic organizations.
It is.
There is great to and fro. I mean, a general comes, he has a TST with the men, he takes some points, he meets the officers in the evening, he takes them points. The informal aspects are as important as the formal aspects. There's constant feedback. So despite that very steely external veneer, it has deep compassion at heart. Very difficult for any civilian to comprehend, because the civilian always thinks, the military is this stiff organization which doesn't talk to its people. It's not true at all. As they would be wonderful models in the bureaucracy.
I'm still not convinced about the politics and how political leaders are working at the moment. Why? Primarily because one of the main reasons is because I like to believe that leadership, the main point and factor of leadership is discipline. Would you agree to that?
So there are many politicians who are more disciplined than me. By name them, they look like flattery, but are you saying the Prime Minister is not disciplined? Or are you saying the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh is not disciplined? Very disciplined.
But I see it's lacking in the political avenue.
We have spread this myth has grown that, see, politicians are necessarily evil. That is not true. They are delivering under great challenges, very challenging circumstances. Today, I mean, I somehow fail to grasp this. Politics is the toughest profession to be in. You have to get re-elected 5 years. You have to get elected without money. And let me also tell you, honestly, if you were to discuss it, there was a time in the country when the bureaucracies perhaps led the politicians in terms of deliverance. Today, hasn't that changed? The politician is telling you, do this, do this, do this, do this. Very fine ideas, and we are saying, or time chahiye, or ye chahiye. So at least, I would say this, all I am saying is that there are good and bad leaders across walks of life. Of course, they have shaped their attributes to meet the demands of their profession. What the attributes of a good political leader may not be the same as the attributes of a good military leader. Attributes change over times. In one era, you may need thought leaders. The other era, you may need futurists. Third era, you may need technologists. And so, even within the military, there are so many shades.
Right.
So, the military is greatly about combat leadership, but it is not only about combat leadership. There's so many.
There's a lot of strategy involved as well.
Strategizing, technology, international relations, all that. So, therefore, leadership is the biggest challenge in life because it is so loosely defined and yet it is so central to success.
So earlier I asked you whether leaders are born or made. Sam Manekshaw believed that given him a rational individual with strategic acumen, he can make him a leader. Do you think that's possible? And how would you make up an individual a great leader?
Did he say so?
Yes, sir.
I don't know in what context he said so. I mean, I can mentor you, but can I make you a leader? You have to find your own way. I can say Shivam is good, so I will get him to this place, give him the opportunity to prove himself. But I can't make you a leader. I can spot leaders. That's also an art.
Yeah.
Good leaders are not insecure. They spot talent.
That's what Sam Manekshaw did with General.
That's my hunch. So that is very important. Mentoring is a very good thing. Mentoring is what? Spotting talent. Spotting talent, giving it an opportunity to perform. Manekshaw could have given him command of 4 corps, but he couldn't have helped him with the execution of those very challenging operations. So you spot talent. Mentoring is good. But you cannot make somebody a leader. I make my own brand of leadership and hope that it succeeds in a given circumstance.
What are the 5 main qualities you would see in a person who you would call a leader?
Me personally,
You personally, if you find someone, what are the 5 things and factors that you would be looking at?
honesty, clarity, talent, risk taking, doggedness, tenacity. Top of my head, these are the 5.
So this has been a lovely conversation with you on the subject of leadership.
Thank you. Hope you.
Thank you so much for this, sir.
Your viewers enjoy it.
I would like to ask you 2-3 more questions.
Yeah, please.
If the time allows.
Yeah.
We were speaking about 1971, and we were talking about Dhaka and Bangladesh. And we see that there's a lot of problems happening in Bangladesh because of their elections in Bangladesh. And so there's been a narrative of pushing India out of Bangladesh, and how we have been getting bad PR from a neighborhood such as Maldives and Bangladesh as well. What do you think why is that happening?
India's geostrategic location, its size, and so many other attributes, its economy, population, make it a big power. So nations in the neighborhood will respond to you in 2 ways. One is that they will play you off with the other big powers. That is going to be natural. And there will always be, shall we say, segments within that country which are pro you, and some will be anti you. And that is going to happen anyway. Bangladesh, Maldives, even Nepal, and all these places. We have to make sure, and that is where our diplomacy's adeptness will come, in making sure that we are fair in our dealings with these nations. We do not let our self-interest be compromised. Yet there has to be an element of magnanimity with smaller nations. I mean, there has to be give and take, and the give has to be more than the take when you are a big power. That is my view, which means what? We must be firm when it comes to our national interest. Firm when it comes to our national interest, but a lot of give and take otherwise. This other bit cannot be held. Some of it is natural, some of it is propped up by our own adversaries, this anti-India sentiment. There is politics in it, geopolitics in it. That will constantly keep happening. So that should not unnerve a country of India's size. And who's spared of it? The Chinese, with all their wolf warrior diplomacy, they are in a complete mess when it comes to neighbors around them.
Yeah.
Look at the problems with Philippines, with Korea, South Korea.
20 nations they have a conflict with.
So this will always be a case. It should not put us off, but we should be constantly vigilant.
Should we be worried about, because we always been a well-wisher of such nations such as Maldives,
So also take the positive aspects. I mean, despite there being this anti-India sentiment, the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been very good to us. We've enjoyed a very good relationship with her. So the formal relationship has been very good. It has been very productive. We have stood by each other in many challenges. Sri Lanka, and they are pretty grateful for the manner in which we came to their rescue in their recent economic downturn. The Prime Minister has visited Bhutan recently. So there will always be challenges in the neighborhood. It should not unnerve us, but we should be vigilant and watchful. Should never worry us.
Is there any trends, risk coming from China to these nations that are getting supported by China, and that's why they're being anti-India at the moment?
Of course. So that's the Chinese strategy for long. See, China, in my view, wants to contain India in the South Asian box. The way China looks at politics is one tiger on a hill. They know that on the Asian hill there will be one tiger. India has been saying there can be 2 tigers on either slope, but China doesn't seem to quite think that way. So they will exert pressure to make sure that India doesn't break out of this box, but which we are doing now. Look at IMEC. That's one way of breaking out. Now we have got this whole corridor to the east also, Act East, and we are going to now link the Pacific to the Indian Ocean to West Asia and Europe, Greece. This is the old spice route plus. So this is our endeavor to break out of the box. While we are willing to live at peace with China, it has to be on equal terms. It has to be on the premise that there is space for both. So that is our game. We will play our game. China will play its game. The other geopolitical reality is that for the first time in history, at least that's my reading, you have 2 nations, the world's number 1 economy in PPP terms and number 3 in PP terms. China, India, growing in close proximity. Today, the Himalayas are not there as a buffer because technology has breached them. Tibet is not there as a buffer. So their trajectories will clash. The only way that clash will be peaceful is through deterrence. So we must invest greatly in our deterrence so that there are no weaknesses. The other things will be a part and parcel of the diplomatic and strategic hardball. It will keep going on. This wrestling for ascendancy, positioning. We are also doing the same.
So as you say, the world's on an edge. We see a new conflict every day. Where do you think this is going towards? So like we recently saw Iran sending their troops as well, sending in missiles. What next? What next?
But I don't think it should worry us too much. I was reading a quote by Winston Churchill, जिसका लबो लबाब या some in substance ये है that throughout history there have been more periods of war than peace. It's a reality. I'm not commenting on it right or wrong. We were singularly fortunate to have this elongated period of peace post-Cold War, when you had this one hegemon, so there was peace. Now that the singularity of that hegemon, the power of that hegemon is being challenged. Look at what's happening. In 1960, in the first 5 economies, there was not a single Asian country. Today there are 3. The center of gravity in power politics is shifting towards Asia. There are new challenges. Asia may be the toast of the world today. If you go by demographics and some other factors, the future is Africa. 11 out of 20 countries, fastest growing economies today are African. China is in demographic trouble. We are also, our demography is being challenged.
It's support in terms of our age.
Youth contributes to the economy, vitality, growth comes from that. So China is in deep trouble. We are in some kind of trouble. Africa, 60% is below 25 or below 30. Demographics, economy. So the global center of gravity will keep shifting. The reigning powers will constantly be challenged. If wars are more the norm than the exception, as per Winston Churchill, we should continue to invest in our instruments of force.
Definitely.
So Bill Clinton was wrong when he said it's the economy stupid. It is economy and national security. The West is paying the price for not investing in deterrence. So you are seeing this theater of failing deterrence. Act 1 was Afghanistan, Act 2 Ukraine, Act 3 West Asia, Act 4 could be Taiwan. What should worry the West is Russia. Iran is now challenging you. Look what it's done. For the first time, it struck Israel directly. Look at the consequences. And if it is 2 to 3 screwdriver turns away from becoming a nuclear power, if it becomes a nuclear power, when it challenges Israel, it is also challenging the Americans.
The US,
So the Americans know that they should be looking at the Western Pacific. Putin first draws them in, now Iran draws them in. I know I should be boxing here, but I've got one opponent here, one opponent. It takes the gaze off the Chinese. That should worry us. See what is happening in Taiwan. So of late, the Chinese have been stroking this narrative that the West is declining, American power is declining. And so they will ask the Taiwanese that, listen, they couldn't help the Ukrainians. Will they help you? Very unlikely. It weakens the Taiwanese resolve. Now I believe some delegations have gone to, I'm not too sure, read it in the social media. Taiwanese delegations are going to China and saying, maybe Americans will not come to our help. So let's do a Hong Kong kind of deal with you. China will say, please come. And one is a possibility. One hears in social media. Now look at it. So we will do a Hong Kong deal with you and then do a Hong Kong with you, finally. So this is that, fine art of winning without fighting. So you're of course right. What should worry us is how power is now being projected in these new ways. Russia, Iran. And it does seem that Russia, Iran, North Korea, China are succeeding. It should worry us. I never dreamt that North Korea will bail the Americans out in terms of ammunition supply, but they have done it. The West, they've recently done some rejigging and they have come to the conclusion that America and the West will build up their artillery munition stockpiles to 1.5 million rounds a month. But by when? 2025. What is the Russian stockpile today? 5 million rounds per month. No wonder they are winning in Advikia. They fire 10,000 rounds, Ukrainians fire 1,000 rounds. So I'm not making a case for warmongering, I'm making a case for deterrence. If you neglect your military arsenal, these will be the consequences.
So you're saying India needs to focus on defense manufacturing and Atmanirbhar Bharat, is it?
Which we are doing. India must make the most of the peace dividend. See, the arc of conflict is traveling from Europe to West Asia to Taiwan. It may come closer home. We should not regret 5-10 years later that when we had the time, we didn't do enough. So these things must be reviewed constantly. See, I'll give you one metric which you must analyze, we must study. Recently, the Chinese defense budget was announced. It was a 7.2% growth. They are growing their defense by 7.2% when their economy is growing by only 3 to 4%. We are growing our defense by 2% when our economy is growing by 7%. So are the Chinese callous or are we wise? Are we spending enough or are the Chinese overspending? These are constant issues of war and peace. So there is nothing more interesting than war and peace, geopolitics, leadership. It all has to come together. Let's get back to our leadership. Our higher order leadership has to grapple with these issues. It's just not fighting. Look at how war fighting is changing. This drone missile complex, I mean, it is overwhelming air defenses. Look at look at the power of asymmetry, I'll give you. So these Houthis, I'm told, they fired 3 drones, $20,000 each. Kitna hua? $60,000. The Americans fire 6 missiles to intercept. If not 6, 3 missiles to intercept. $2 billion each. How much is it? $6 billion? Say 2 hit, 1 misses. This drone goes through and strikes a US warship, which is now $30 billion and 300 sailors. Power of asymmetry.
Yeah.
So look at how challenging national security is. So we have to be extremely watchful, make use of the peace dividend, constantly invest in deterrence, not forget Vivekananda. The world is but a gymnasium where nations come to make themselves strong. The world is what it always was. Contested. I think those last 20, 30 years were a golden period. Peace dividend. They have gone. The war it is back to what it was. There have been as many bouts of war as there have been peace. It shouldn't surprise us.
So do you think leadership and decision making would change when there will be technological advancements such as AI?
I made this point before on your show that if AI is going to become billion times smarter than the human mind by 2033, billion times, let that not be lost, billion times. But it is still within human control. So today what matters is the human prompt. There is compute power, there are large language models, but what AI will do is how you train those models. वो training आपके हाथ में है, जो आप उनको data वेटा देते हो उसके. You know, Mo Godat makes a lovely point. He says, AI is like a child prodigy, a very precocious child. He's telling the parents, what do you want me to do? If you want him to discover drugs, he will do that. If you want him to discover medicinal cure, he will do that. If you want him to fire drones, he will do that. So, उसकी गलती नहीं है. आप उसको जो बोलोगे वो करने. The problem today is that there is more money in firing drones in combat than in using drones to pollinate crops. Human leadership today, you need that kinds of leadership which draws a line, which makes sure that you invest in the positive aspects of AI so that the negative aspects don't overwhelm you. As always, leadership needs statesmanship. So AI today demands statesmanship. To say that AI can do a lot of good, it can also do a lot of harm. Step in. When you don't step in, the problem comes. Let me give you one more figure. People say the economic opportunity in AI is $15 billion by 2030 and a mind-boggling $15 trillion by 2030 and $100 trillion by 2070. So if you do not have AI prowess, you will not be an economy of consequence. India needs to analyze large language models, compute. We started off something, but A new game has already begun. The AI game has begun. So technology poses constant challenges to leadership. Often leadership lacks technology.
Yeah, decision making improves.
AI, it does. But your very grasp of AI, these big questions on AI, leadership has to grapple with them. So we are, and somebody says, we are in the most profound period of change in recorded history, much of which is being driven by technology. So it's a leadership challenge. Mediocrity will no longer do. You will need talent.
One final question I want to pose it to you is on the question that I'm sure you get a lot, is on the World War III dynamics. Do you think we are turning towards, all these crises are leading towards World War III?
Absolutely. And so the larger point that I make is, we must ask, why is deterrence failing? It is not, the question is not why did Putin attack? The question is, why did Western deterrence fail? Look at common sense. The richest cohort in the world, the European Union, richest cohort. So there's no dearth of money. You have technology, you have prosperity, and 69% of your defense budget comes from America. Are you being smart or clever by half? If you are clever by half, why blame Putin? You said, I won't spend on defense. Putin said, I will spend on defense. And when push comes to shove, I will do what I did. Now you can keep saying, why did Putin attack? You allowed him to attack him. Deterrence failure. Why should deterrence fail? Because you are under-investing in your instruments, atrophying statecraft. Look at American statecraft. Why should it allow itself to get into this position where you are involved in 3 theatres? You're dispersed in 3 theatres, you can't win in 1? Statecraft. Now you don't do this stuff. What is the logic of that? So this is exactly it. You asked for it. If you were militarily strong, you think Putin would have attacked? He saw weakness. So deterrence, I'm saying, is the most fundamental principle. If deterrence continues to fail, if we don't invest in deterrence, the number of conflicts will grow, which they are. And one unfortunate miscalculation, as it happened in World War I, could lead to a wider conflagration. But there is always hope. If the Israelis have responded in this restrained manner, by really not going after the Iranians, it perhaps shows that a fresh deterrence has been re-established in West Asia, where Iran has said, listen, now stop all this. You're doing too much of this, assassinating here and hitting my embassies there. You do that, I'm going to. And the Israelis have really not gone whole hog in their response.
But Iran didn't succeed in their attack.
They did not succeed. Now, there are 2-3 theories about it. One is that it was calibrated by the Americans so that they don't succeed. The other was that I'm told out of their 170 ballistic missiles, half of them misfired at launch. So the ballistic missile launch was a big disaster. So it could be either. But the issue is that the paradigm change was that Iran and Israel were fighting through proxies first. So hitting Hezbollah was kosher, hitting Hamas was kosher. You are now hitting each other. That is the big change. There is a huge, and Iran is no pushover as a military power. So the 2 major regions, it's like India and China fighting. One is through proxies, one is to get into a direct fight. So in that sense, it was extremely consequential. But it does seem, by the way of Israeli response, if there is nothing else going to come, that in their minds they have realized that we better, reach some kind of understanding by way of deterrence, and otherwise there's going to be further trouble.
It's pretty evident that China is trying to be a superpower. It's pretty evident. How is US coping with that? How is US making a line between them and China at the moment?
At the moment, it seems to me that the US is doing rather poorly. Deterrence is failing everywhere. They're not invested in their own domestic discord. Look at that domestic discord between Trump and Biden. So the indicators don't sound good. But see, USA is always a comeback power. It has been challenged many times in the past. It has been wavered in the past, but it has come back. That could happen. But China today has problems. China's economy now, it's very clear that in current dollar terms, it is plateaued at about 20% below the American economy. So that business of China overtaking USA is not going to happen pretty soon. this Advanced Chips Act and all has also made sure that the real high-end technology may not now come to China. So I think for the time being, there seems to be a leveling off where USA is here, China is here. But this is not like Soviet Union and USA. Soviet Union, at no point its economy exceeded 40% of the American economy. The Chinese economy is already 70% of each. And look at these, this end of China stories. So in 1990, The Economist carried an article which said the coming collapse of China. Coming collapse. And what was China's economy? $180 billion. Last month, The Economist was again headlined, End of Growth Story. What is China's economy? $22 trillion. So in all these predictions of the coming collapse of China, the Chinese economy has grown what? 60%. So these stories of the coming collapse don't seem to be happening. So there is the reality somewhere between, but the Sino-US competition is going to intensify. And we have to now make sure that we are well positioned, our deterrence is in place, because we are also in the big game now.
How hopeful are you for that? That's my final question for you, because I want to end the conversation in some positivity and some hope.
So the hope is good, because as I've said on your show before, we have started the national security makeover, which is the boldest since independence. But that's not a done deal. It's the edifice. You have to complete the makeover. So hope certainly, but that makeover has to be completed in terms of the many issues that I put on your. For example, Atmanirbhar Bharat has started, but it has to be scaled up.
Speed,
scale, in the manner in which you look at this whole business. In my view, L1 is not the best way of discovering price metrics. It has to be firm demand signaling. There are better models, military business case models for doing that. All that kind of stuff. We have to invest in these emerging domains of space, cyber. Far greatly, space has become the new domain of war fighting. Multiple challenges. So I will say we've begun well, but it has to be completed. In life, there are no free lunches. You have to constantly work.
The first challenge is the elections. Anything can go past it only after a leader is emerged.
Yeah, but that's only a month. So by June, we'll have somebody in place. We'll take the India story forward.
Right. Beautiful, sir. Thank you so much for your time again.
Thanks
sir.
a lot, Shivam.
It has been an insightful conversation for me, and I'm sure for the audience as well.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you.